All right, we need to talk about a political phenomenon coming out of Japan in late 2025 that is just wild. It's a story about an entire generation, their anxieties, and one leader who has completely captured their imagination. So what really happens when a generation gives almost all of its support to a single person? Let's dive in.
First, just let this number sink in for a second. 92.4%. That's the approval rating for Prime Minister Sanae Takaichi among people aged 18 to 29. And no, that's not a typo. A number like that is, well, it's practically unheard of in any modern democracy. The big question is, why?
Now, the immediate reaction, the easy answer you'd see in a headline, is that Japan's youth have all just become super conservative. But as we're about to see, that explanation doesn't just miss the mark, it's pretty much the opposite of what's actually happening. This isn't about ideology in the way we usually think about it at all. To really get that 92.4%, you have to throw out the usual political labels. This isn't about left versus right. For this generation of young people in Japan, it all comes down to one core driver that beats everything else: simple survival. And this is the absolute key right here. They are not trying to preserve the way things are. Not at all. They've grown up their entire lives in an era of economic stagnation, where the current path feels less like a safe bet and more like a guaranteed failure. For them, the status quo is the problem. Their support for Takaichi is a radical gamble, a kind of desperate act of self-defense against a future that they see as a slow, certain collapse.
And this brings us to this really important idea from our source material, hyperpragmatism. See, this isn't about falling in love with a particular political philosophy. It's a strategy to minimize risk. It is a cold, hard calculation made by a generation that feels like it just can't afford another loss. So they're choosing the one option that seems least likely to make their already shaky situation any worse.
This slide just lays out the choice so clearly. On one side, you've got the old way, the establishment, promising gradual change. But to this generation, that just sounds like a slow and certain decline. On the other side, you've got Takaichi, offering what some would call destructive reform. And yeah, to them, it's a huge risk, but it's the only risk that offers any chance at all, to break out of this cycle they've been stuck in. But look, a pragmatic choice like this doesn't just happen in a vacuum. It's being supercharged by these really deep-seated psychological needs, and of course, the technology that basically runs our lives. So that's the second piece of the puzzle here: anxiety and algorithms. You know, our source material points to this pattern that we see again and again throughout history. When people are feeling deep economic anxiety, they tend to gravitate towards a strong leader. And this isn't always about specific policies. It's about the feeling of stability, that sense of control that a decisive person seems to offer when the world feels like it's spinning completely out of control. And then you pour social media on top of all that. This slide just nails how the echo chamber works. It all starts with one short, powerful, pro-Takaichi video. Then, the algorithm sees you liked it and starts feeding you more and more of the same, creating this intense emotional feedback loop. Pretty soon, it starts to feel like everyone agrees with you. And the final, most dangerous step? All the complex, critical information, the stuff about risks, the other points of view, it all just gets filtered out. So you might be asking, what about Takaichi's really controversial positions on social issues, like LGBTQ+ rights? This quote gets right to the heart of it. It's not that her young supporters are ignorant of her views. Oh, they know. They are making an active choice to be indifferent. It's a fascinating and kind of chilling concept our source calls selective indifference. And here's the thinking behind that indifference. It's been called the sinking ship analogy. The logic goes like this. When the ship you're on is going down, your number one absolute priority is patching the holes in the hull. You focus on the economy, on security, the things you think will keep you all from drowning. Everything else, no matter how important it is, just has to wait. It's a brutal calculation, but for them, it's a necessary one. This brings us to the most mind-bending part of this whole story. There's this massive, almost unbelievable gap between the image of Prime Minister Takaichi that her young supporters are rallying behind and the political reality of who she actually is. The image is incredibly powerful. In the universe of social media clips and online stories, she is seen as the destroyer of the old guard. She's a hero, a kind of political Joan of Arc, who's fighting the corrupt, stagnant system of Japan's ruling party from the inside. But then you look at the facts, and the reality tells a very different story. She is the direct political heir to the conservative Abe faction. She's appointed politicians who are caught up in financial scandals to really important jobs.
She's actively fighting against reforms to the political donation systems, the very systems that prop up the establishment she's supposedly destroying. The truth is, she isn't destroying the old system. She is an expert at using its power to keep herself at the top.
So what's the end game here? What happens when an entire generation bets its future on an image? What is the real cost of this level of passion, especially when it's all aimed at one person instead of a set of ideas?
What the analysis is showing is a really dangerous shift taking place. Support for her is moving away from a rational look at her policies, things like tax cuts. Instead, it's becoming this emotional, almost faith-based belief in her as a person. The thinking is no longer, I like her policies, but simply, Takaichi will fix it. She, the individual, has become the entire solution. And this is where the risks become crystal clear. When a leader is seen as perfect, as infallible, democratic checks and balances start to wear away. It becomes impossible to have a real debate about tough but necessary policies. And suddenly, any facts that don't fit the narrative, bad economic news, diplomatic problems, they're no longer seen as valid points. They get dismissed as just conspiracies from the media or foreign enemies.
Which leaves us with this final really important question. What's happening in Japan is a powerful case study, for sure, but the lesson here is universal. In our age of anxiety, information overload, and algorithmic bubbles, what is the ultimate price we all pay when we choose to believe in a simple, comforting image over a messy and complicated reality?